Hi, I'm Joni Patry, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Well, today I want to talk about Mars retrograde because Mars is due to go retrograde September 9th and will continue to be retrograde till November 14th. This is all this year, 2020. And let me talk a little bit about what the retrograde cycle's all about, because obviously, no planet really starts going backwards, but it's all in perspective from planet Earth. So as a planet is cycling around the sun, as we may move forward from that planet in speed, it appears that the other planet goes backwards from our vantage point. But whatever that planet rules, whenever it does go retrograde, or even if you have it retrograde in your own birth chart, those issues are unresolved. I always say that when a planet's retrograde, it's something that's been left undone in another lifetime that you've come to complete. So when a planet goes retrograde, whatever it rules will be prominent, because when a planet goes retrograde from the vantage point of Earth, it is actually closest to the Earth when it's retrograde. That's why when a planet's retrograde, it appears much brighter in the sky, because it really is closer. So in this process with Mars, remember the retrograde is always about a time to review, to reflect, to take in matters that this planet rules, because all the planets are going a certain direction, meaning forward. And then this planet starts to pull back and go backwards. It's time to focus in on the issues that planet is here to teach us. So everything's about review, reanalyzing, retake, reflect. It's a time to pull back and really look into these matters, not to force forward, because it's not about that. And actually, there's nothing wrong with the planet that's retrograde. It's just a time that that planet becomes a focus. So whatever it's about will manifest. So let's talk about what Mars rules, because all of these issues are going to be so prevalent within this period. And Mars does go retrograde, by the way, about every 24 to 26 months. And therefore, it doesn't go retrograde but once every 2 years. But once it is retrograde, it will stay retrograde for about 60 to 80 days. And within that process, many times, Mars can stay in a sign for 6 months. But sometimes when it's going retrograde, as it is this time, at the very beginning of a sign, it's going to straddle 2 signs. So when Mars turns retrograde, it will be September 9th, 4 degrees of Aries, and it's going to go back into Pisces. And when it stations to turn direct, it will be 21 degrees of Pisces. So it's going to straddle the 2 signs of Aries and Pisces. So these signs will be prominent. And you need to look in your chart to see where this is happening in your chart, because whatever house it's in will be relevant to things that come up in your face that you need to address. Especially like if it's in your house of marriage or relationships. So that would mean Mars in Aries, you'd have a Libra ascendant. But aside from that, in terms of world events, what does Mars rule, first of all? It rules energy, high energy. And therefore it deals with competition in sports. And you're going to find that the area of sports are going to come into play big time, probably because Mars also rules competition, but anger, frustration. It deals with Mars being retrograde, and even when someone does have Mars retrograde in their birth chart, they have a hard time expressing their anger because it pulls it in, and this is exactly what they're supposed to learn how to do, to express their anger, because they don't know how. And usually they express it in all the wrong ways. But this is exactly what they're here to learn. This is what we are going to learn, because when Mars goes retrograde, it brings out the anger, the frustration, therefore it brings violence. And Mars also rules all weapons, such as guns, such as knives, such as explosives. It rules accidents. But because it rules violence, all of these variables are going to be used. There's going to be more violence using guns, weapons, attacks. This is Mars. It is the planet of war. So that's why you don't necessarily want Mars in your marriage house, because that's the Kuja dosha thing I was talking about. Problems in relationships. Mars can be it deals with conflict. So therefore it deals with arguments. It deals with frustration and anger. But let me go into a few more things that maybe you didn't know Mars rules. In Vedic astrology, Mars rules your siblings, your brothers and sisters. Why? They're the ones that we're in competition with as children. And so during this Mars retrograde, things may come up, issues that maybe have been unresolved with you and your brothers and sisters. Another thing that Mars rules, it will rule real estate. It does rule real estate and property. So therefore, I believe the real estate markets, the price of property will come down in certain areas. People are moving out of the cities because of the violence that's going to be ensuing for the next few months intensely with Mars being retrograde. So everything to do with violence is going to be here. So Mars will deal with protesting. There's going to be great protests that come about. If you think you've seen the culmination point of protest, think again. It's going to become more severe and more intense. So there's some really interesting things I think about this cycle of Mars, because as I said, it stays in a sign sometimes for 6 months, but in this case it's going to straddle 2 signs. But in the cycle of Mars, it can come back to the same sign it was before retrograde, that is, about every 15 to 16 years. So the last time that Mars was retrograde in Aries, it was the year of 2005. Now, sometimes it skips a sign, but generally every year, so every 2 years, when Mars goes retrograde in this cycle, it moves up 1 sign in the zodiac from the sign it was before. Therefore, so in the next 2 years when Mars goes retrograde again, because it's retrograde in Aries now, it will be retrograde in Taurus. So I feel like whatever the issues in these signs are about, they come to the surface for us to look at and to heal, because Mars is energy. And one thing I forgot to mention about Mars, it also rules blood and blood flow. So sometimes when people have an afflicted Mars, they may have to look at their circulation problems and look at blood flow, such as dealing with heart attacks, strokes, and blood pressure. But it rules blood. And of course, when we're dealing with violence, sometimes we will see blood, because it rules war. But I think it's so interesting that we'll see that every retrograde cycle, every 2 years, it moves up a sign. And by about, give or take, about 15 or 16 years, that's when it returns back to the sign that it is currently in. So going back to 2005, I thought it was really interesting. I looked up what was going on then to get some relevance of Mars being in Aries before. So it was about let's see, it was that Mars was retrograde, and this was the time of, okay, here we go, 2005, and I looked it up in Paris. There were major protests and attacks that went on in October to November of 2005. There were riots where 2,700 people about were arrested and about 8,000 vehicles were burned. So these were violent. These were crazy protests during this time. And get this, Mars was retrograde October 2nd through December 10th of 2005. And all of these protests took place October and November of 2005. So here is validation. And here's the thing, it was in Aries. Aries is the planet that Mars rules. It's intensified. Aries is the sign of impulsiveness, of jumping into things, not thinking. It is quite the sign that can go along with the violence, intensifying violence. Mars is fiery in this fire sign of Aries. But at this point, Mars at 4 degrees of Aries, when it's going to station to go retrograde on September 9th, it will be in the nakshatra Ashwini. And Ashwini does deal with travel. It deals with travel, and it's also known for healing. And I think this Mars retrograde is going to bring about a necessary, needed healing that's never been attained before. But through violence, through protests, it's finally going to come. But also being in the nakshatra of Ashwini. Ashwini, because it deals with travel and Mars's accidents, be aware there can be some issues and problems about travel accidents. This will come about the last time that in 2005, Mars went retrograde in the center of Aries, stayed completely in the sign of Aries. But this time we have it going back and forth, which we have another dilemma that's happening during this time, and that is that Mars will be Gandanta for the course of the next couple of months. Gandanta, I know you've heard me say it before, but for those that are listening in on the first time, it's when planets are in the last degrees of a water sign and the early degrees of a fire sign. And it means losing control. It means drowning. It means floods and fires will be rampant during this time. I think in the protests, people are going to be burning down more things. Imagine that. So let me give you the lowdown of a few things dealing with this Mars. I call it Mars cycle because I want you to get a feel of where exactly it's going to be so you can gauge this. So Mars enters Pisces. It entered Pisces June 18th through the 16th. And it will, no, through August 16th. So once again, Mars entered Pisces June 18th through August 16th. And it will enter Pisces again, because of the retrograde motion, October 4th through December 24th. And it will be in Aries. It entered Aries August 16th. Through October 4th. And then again, Mars will enter Aries December 24th, and it will remain there till February 22nd of 2021. So this is this back and forth phase of Mars while it is in Aries, intensifying things in an angry way. But Pisces, the last part of Pisces is really Gandanta, but remember, even when it's in early fire, like the first few degrees of Aries, it's still Gandanta. So when will Mars be Gandanta? When will Mars be exactly 29 degrees of Pisces? This is August 14th through the 16th, and also October 5th through the 7th, and last, December 22nd through the 25th. This was when Mars is exactly 29 degrees. But realize 28 degrees, it's still Kandanta. Realize that 0, 1, 2 degrees of Aries. So basically, we've got some intensity of out of control, crazy situations with anger, frustration, rage. And this will even affect your personal lives in so many ways. So to sum it all up, what do I think this Mars cycle is going to bring? I think it's going to bring extreme violence, many protests in this violence, any unresolved issues of anger will resurface for a healing to occur, and a healing will occur. And I've even looked back at where Mars begins to station around November 14th. It will be 21 degrees of Pisces, which is, in the United States chart that I use, it is going to be opposing Saturn, which is in the 10th house of leadership, which means major violence pertaining to the government, the ruler, the leader, as well as Mars will be squaring the Sun in this chart, which is 22 degrees of Gemini, while Mars sits at 21 degrees of Pisces. So the Sun is leadership in a chart. And right around in November, the elections, November 14th, there's going to be rage, protests, and violence. Mark my words, the planets never lie. So with that, I'd like to close. If you would like more information on me, you can always go to my website, which is galacticcenter.org. And don't forget to sign up for my free newsletter. As well as, if you would love to learn Vedic astrology, join our community of astrologers. Go to my university website, which is University of Vedic Astrology.com. Thank you.